Okay, this is the last tissue of our vascular connective tissues before we get into 3 cartilages that are avascular. So before I deal with reticular connective tissue formally, let's go and take a look at our starting place, which was our loose areolar connective tissue. You remember we had collagen fibrils that lent strength to this tissue. There were elastic fibers that would distend and recoil, giving an elasticity to the tissue. And then I had these reticular fibers that formed a net-like structure, a 3-dimensional net-like structure called a reticulum, the function of which is to hold the functional cells in place. And so we had our dense connective tissues that focused on collagen, elastic connective tissue that focused on elastic fibers. And now I'm going to have a reticular connective tissue that's going to focus on the reticulum of the reticular fibers. Now this tissue is vascular. The fibers are made by fibroblasts, and in this image it's going to be really hard to tell one from the other. Now, looking at this image here, what you can see is there's all these little black lines. Now, what's really important to note, you can sort of see this sort of weaving in and out, sort of like that, all over the place. There's just a lot of them. And I want you to think, if you were to take a thin slice of the loofah sponge, it might look like that. But when you look at that loofah sponge, that it has this 3-dimensional structure. And so you need to sort of realize and appreciate the fact that these reticular fibers, we're getting some cross sections where the knife cut through it, but it is weaving it out in a 3-dimensional sort of a way. And this 3-dimensional net-like reticulum is going to function to hold the cells in place. Now you can see in here there's a whole lot of little pink cells. Okay, there are a lot of white blood cells in this particular case. And what happens is this is a lymph node, and fluid is going to be percolating, if you will, through this lymph node. And because fluid is just sort of flowing through it, there's the potential that these pink cells could be flushed out. And so since I don't want them to be washed out, what I'm going to throw in there is a reticulum. The reticulum is that structure, that fibrous structure that the reticular connective tissue is producing. And so whenever I have an organ that is going to process a whole lot of fluid, what I'm going to throw in there is a reticulum. And what sort of organs would have this? Well, number one, lymph nodes, huge. You'll see this in ANP2. Your spleen processes a lot of blood and fluid. So I'm going to need a reticulum to hold the cells in place. Your liver processes a tremendous amount of fluid and blood. And I'm going to need to hold the cells in place, so I'm going to throw in a reticulum. And so there may be some other tissues there, but intermingled with it will be this reticulum that's created by the reticular connective tissue. And so again, all these black fibers are reticular fibers. It's stained special to see those. Here's another image. And again, what you can see here, this is definitely a lymph node for sure. And I have all these white blood cells here, and fluid is percolating through this lymph node. And there's the potential that these white blood cells could be flushed out. And so you can see these blue fibers here as forming this 3-dimensional net-like structure, which we call a reticulum, which helps to keep all the functional cells in place. I want you to note this is a lymph node, and I mentioned that lymph nodes are encapsulated. So right here I have an irregular dense connective tissue. So these are the collagen fibrils that are weaving in and out, encapsulating the lymph node. And then out here I have some adipose connective tissue. So the function of a reticular connective tissue is to produce a reticulum to hold the cells in place. And organs that would have this would be the spleen, the liver, and the lymph nodes for sure. This image, which came from Berkshire Community College, is saying muscle tissue, cardiac. That's cardiac muscle. That's not what this is. This is definitely a lymph node. It's definitely the lymphatic system. So that's an error. I'm not sure why it says that. Okay, but it is an excellent picture of reticular connective tissue.